Welcome to Inspiring Innovation, where your host, Sean Frost, is joined by experts in the manufacturing industry to discuss bringing big ideas to life. Join us every episode for a deep dive into manufacturing trends, processes, innovation, and how to be successful in the ever-changing world of manufacturing.
Welcome to another episode of Inspiring Innovation. We release an episode every second Tuesday. We're speaking to sourcing professionals, project engineers, people that are trying to launch new devices into the world in the medical industries, in industrial, power sports industries, aviation, safety. We touch a lot of different markets with our capabilities of sealing, sewing, and thermoforming. And we're excited to bring on somebody today that is a technical expert, but also now on the sales team. She brings a really unique background and set of experiences to our sales team. And Ellen Kershke has been with Polo for a little over probably 3 or 4 years now, and mostly in our product development department. So I'm really excited to have her on as a guest today to discuss what she's learned in both of her different roles and some of the crossover that's taken place. So, Ellen, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, I'll just dive right in and ask you about that. Since you've been in product development and you've been in sales at Polo, can you share a story that highlights how this dual perspective has benefited our customers?
Yeah, I think one thing that comes to mind is when we were in Anaheim, California this past February. We were there for the MD&M trade show. Our primary objective is to bring in new business on the sales team. And so a trade show is a great place to go do that. There's so many other people in our industry attending that we get to talk to and make new connections and hopefully win some new business. One thing that I think my experience in product development helped me navigate that massive trade show was my technical understanding of Polo's capabilities. So, one approach to bringing a new business is kind of to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. But I felt I was really able to take a more tailored approach in the conversations and make sure that the needs of the people that we were talking to really fit Polo's capabilities. And I actually ended up letting some people know that, hey, I think that sounds like a great product idea. I don't think that it is the best fit for Polo. And we were actually able to make really good connections with those people who appreciated my honesty that maybe it just wasn't the best fit this time around. And I actually heard from one of those contacts earlier this week that they have a new product now that they're looking to develop that is more within Polo's capabilities. So it's not always about getting the most volume. It's also about finding the right fit, and people really appreciate the honesty and communication that this is what we do, and we really want to work with you and partner with you.
That's a great story to share. And as a salesperson and a numbers person, it's sometimes hard for us to grasp that concept specifically. And we want to try to find ways a lot of times of fitting a square peg into a round hole. And so for you to kind of cut through the minutia and save time for the customer and prospect in that process, and really for Polo and our product development team, everybody wins in that scenario. And that's really cool that they did end up coming back to you to discuss a new project that is a better fit for us. So thanks for sharing that. So what's the biggest misconception that you had about sales when you were in product development and vice versa?
I think when I was in product development, I thought sales was all about shaking hands and making deals. And while that is part of it, I did not realize how much data analysis really goes into our decision making for how we manage our customer accounts. We're constantly reviewing numbers, margins, the scope of products that we make for the customer. Is it a customer we make a lot of products for? Is it only one? There's so much in our system that we have to review in order to make those decisions. And it's a lot more of the Excel data work than just having business meetings all the time. Vice versa, I started out in product development, so I think I don't have as much of a idea of what product development would be like from the sales side.
What do you think people on our team might have misconceptions on about product development?
I think there's so much that goes into product development that it's hard for the sales team to see all of the little details that go into it. We have some work instructions or we call them BOMs, the bill of manufacturers, that are over 100 pages long. It takes that many steps to make one product because they're so complicated. And someone from product development writes every single one of those steps, figures out how long it takes to complete that step. And then they have to put it all together and oftentimes do a lot of engineering work to make fixtures or shop aids, something to help assist in making sure that the operator is performing the step consistently every time. So there's so many little things that they have to consider. And I think we're zoomed out a lot of times with our perspective. We're trying to focus on high level and they're really down in the weeds of it. So we appreciate them a lot for doing that.
Yeah, it is sometimes hard for us to understand. We want to get to a quote as fast as possible, a sample as fast as possible. So that perspective is definitely helpful for anyone in sales to hear. And I think my own perspective on that changed a lot just watching the creation of a sample and seeing a swatch of a material that ink was printed on and that going through the heater to dry the ink, but does the material shrink and all the measurements that take place and all the factors and considerations to make sure that the product still meets the dimensions that it needs to for the functionality that it has to perform. So that's really a good example. And maybe this is going to be required training for our sales team at the end after we get through this podcast.
I do think the more time you spend on the production floor, the more you can learn from the team.
All right. Well, how's your experience in product development influenced your approach to new business, especially within the medical and industrial markets?
I think my approach to new business is a little bit different because of my background in the sense that I'm more product focused than account focused. So a lot of times I think in sales, we're focused on the scope of work within the account. What other business opportunities might we have with the customer? And while that's all important for me to consider as well, I think I do get laser focused in on the product itself because I do have the experience knowing how to read the technical drawings. I can really dive in deep to some of those requirements early on just by understanding some of that technical jargon and how to interpret the drawings and really focusing in on the product itself.
100%. I feel like it's been unique to go on customer visits with you and see a sample being placed, within the overall product and the questions that you ask about this label placement or the way that it sits on something or things that I wouldn't even think to ask. And I do think that changes our meetings, short of having one of our engineers or designers there along with us. It is very valuable, and I think the customers appreciate the level of detail and that you put into asking about those products and those samples and what we can do to make it even better for them in another iteration or in the final product. So it's a good example. From your perspective, how does Polo's approach to our design process differ from our competitors?
I think we differ a little bit on the front end where we take the time to consider a lot more factors up front than some of our competitors might. I think a lot of competitors might think that time is of the essence and they'll rush through things, but we will do a much more thorough dive into the requirements to ensure that we understand what we're being asked to make and get the pricing as accurate as possible the first time around. I think there's a lot of different requirements that are easy to put off and maybe think that they're not as important in the initial phases, but they really can cause very large differences in cost. Like, for example, the packaging requirements is often an afterthought, but we ask for that upfront so we know, do you have any type of retail packaging required? that could impact cost? Is it going to be bulk packed 100 units just thrown in a box? There's a lot of different ways that we could package something, and the requirements for that could have a huge impact. And we ask those questions up front.
They're great examples. And yeah, it's funny the difference between a poly bag or a fancy white corrugated box with the logo on it and how much that impacts unit pricing. So that's a really good example. What's the most valuable lesson you learned in product development that you've now used apply in your role in sales?
I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier in our conversation, but visiting the production lines is so useful. I think getting out to the facilities where your customer products are manufactured as often as possible is going to be a huge benefit to our sales team to do every year, because things can change. We get new product lines, maybe the setup changes. There's so much that you can learn from the operators that are actually making the products. So talking to them, ask them questions. What do they struggle with? What's their favorite part of the product? What's their favorite thing to make? Just kind of getting on the ground floor and talking to people is probably, I think, the best thing that you can do to familiarize yourself with your customers and the products that we make for them.
Our associates are incredibly valuable, take incredible pride in their work, and have found improvements and potential issues on the line and have escalated it and found some things that, prevented recalls for our customers and different things that were in the current design, the BOM that they were making, but could have potentially become a problem. And so I think you're right to get out to the lines and to learn from them. It helps us communicate with our customers so much better when you can understand those constraints, bringing customers through our facilities. We had a customer who was formerly an auditor, and so they had lots of questions to kind of try to throw our associates. And she said
Mhm.
the confidence that all of our associates had was incredible and obvious because they were comfortable doing their work while answering her questions and could point out immediately things that she thought they'd need the bomb to reference. They knew where the bomb was and she asked them, but they were all over their replies in terms of, what they need to look for quality standards on each piece. So yeah, I think there's a lot to what you just said.
And you can tell how much they appreciate it too. It's a benefit for us to learn more, but I think it's also a benefit for them because they love to hear that we're interested. We're not just talking to the customer and trying to sell more products. We want to know how it's going, and then being able to see that from us, I think is a big deal.
Big time. Big time. I always make a point to tell them when we're up there for town halls that they make our jobs easy because they're so good at doing what they do. And that confidence that they have in their work and the pride that they have in their work is obvious to our customers for sure. How do you ensure that customer feedback that we get in sales effectively informs our product development team?
I think there's a couple different ways to make sure that the rest of the team gets the customer feedback. The first thing would be is to ask the tough questions. Sometimes our customers will choose another manufacturer because of lead times or because of pricing or because of something else. And they won't necessarily offer up the information on why they're going with another supplier willingly. And I think it's really just important to ask, because they may not share and they may say no, but at least you tried. And in my experience, just asking the question, our customers are pretty forthcoming and they'll let us know why they didn't choose to move forward after quoting with us. For sampling, I think that's another very important area where we need to share feedback with product development from the customer. And I like to request we receive pictures of any feedback. They might be doing some kind of a fitment check on their end. We had a product go to its first round of sampling recently. That was a thermoformed liner that was meant to be fit into a motorcycle compartment. And that was intended to have a really snug fit, so it needed to be just right. And we did see some gapping in an area around one of the corners. So, we received pictures from that customer so that product development could review them. And we jumped on a call and discuss all of the possibilities of how we could improve that fitment. And I think that team is engineers and designers, so they really are visual learners, and being able to have the photos to reference really speeds up that process of second round of sampling.
Can you share an example of when Polo's gone above and beyond to launch a new product or even like a new version of a product for a customer?
We actually have a great example of that because one product that we make for one customer that's really great to work with, they have gone through at least three redesigns of the product since we started manufacturing it. So there's been quite a bit of updates, which we love to see from our customers. We love to hear that they have brought their product that we make for them into the market and they're getting patient feedback to understand what could be better and how we could just better serve the industry. So they find some improvements that they could make to the product, and we help roll out the design changes. And we really supported the efforts to go to a new design for that product with them well past getting into production, to the point where we would have weekly touch points with them to give them updates. They had a little bit of volatile volumes for a little while, and we pivoted really quickly to ramp up, almost doubling our weekly output for them for a brief period of time to help them stay on top of their demand. I feel like I left some things out.
Cost savings would be one.
Oh, okay.
I think you touched on the timelines pretty well there.
Another thing that we did for that customer was they expressed an interest in reducing the price. So we had an engineer dedicated in the production facility to go through every labor step and review it to find it if there was some more efficiencies that could be had. Our production team has also done research in potentially getting new equipment to make the line more efficient. So there's a lot of research and work that's gone into the cost savings initiative that they kicked off.
I think that's a great example because that is a customer that we've supported, that they've basically looked at us as we're not the only supplier in this instance, and they look at us as kind of their scale supplier to really help them with fluctuating demands and to be able to ramp and to be able to be nimble. And I think that's something that really makes Polo unique, is that we can do that for people when they're struggling to meet their demand with their legacy suppliers. We can really scale quickly and have kept some of the fastest growing product demands off of back order for some of the biggest OEMs in the world. And it's something that we take a lot of pride in. What's the most unexpected way your product development background has helped you in your current sales role?
I don't know if this is a great answer to the question because I don't think it's unexpected, but it's been such a great experience. I have to talk about how one of the customers' accounts that I took over when I took the position in the sales role, I had actually been the designer on their product for 2 years prior to coming to the sales role and taking over their account. Being able to be so familiar with their product because I was actually the one sewing the samples, making the product a few years ago when I was still in my lead designer role in product development. That's just been such a great experience because I was already familiar with the customer and they're so great to work with. It's a great medical life-saving device. One of my favorite parts of my job is that we get to help people. And then just knowing the product so intimately that I actually could say that I made one with my own two hands is really awesome.
Yeah, that is so cool. And I saw that at dinner, where it's like normally a customer can't ask us some of the questions that they're able to ask you, and you have intimate knowledge of why this stitch is there, or why this material works with that material, and all the things that we rely on the designers and engineers for. You've been through it, especially with that customer. So what advice would you give someone in product development who wants a better understanding of the sales side of the business?
The advice I would probably give product development if they are wanting to understand the sales side of the business a little bit better would be to zoom out the differences between product development and sales. We look at things from such a higher level. Is the account healthy? What is the relationship with the customer? What's going on in the market? Does the customer have other products that we could be making for them? Do we need to be trying to pursue those new business opportunities? I think that we talked about earlier product development being in the weeds a little bit with their responsibility, and that's kind of the nature of the different roles. We are playing different roles, but wanting to understand sales better, I think just zooming out of some of those technical things and trying to see the big picture of the health of the organization and the relationship with the customer, those kinds of things are the things that we're thinking about regularly.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's part of the reason that we serve the industries that we do. Easier said than done for some of our industries and customers. And I feel for product development because we can throw a lot at them and we want answers yesterday sometimes. I feel like that's another thing that we have worked on is what is our process, what level of details, what tasks are going into this stage of the process, and how can we work better together and really communicate well with each other. So, would you have some advice for the sales team on that side of like how could we get to know and better understand product development too?
Yeah, I think then I would just kind of say do the opposite. So you need to zoom in a little bit more. We're looking at high level, but there's so many granular details that product development. We have recently developed a great tool, which is the visual work instructions. And you can just look at one page of that document and see there's photos, there's text, there's arrows pointing to dimensions and quality requirements, and just a massive amount of information packed onto one page. And then, like I mentioned, some of our work instructions are many, many pages long. So, I mean, you can see that there is so much detail to everything that they do, and bringing yourself to the production lines and looking at the work instructions, and you can see that it's really quite a lot.
Well said. So, zoom in for sales, zoom out for PD. I definitely can resonate with that. Seeing some of the technical documents that we've worked on for a government project and just seeing how many smart people come around the table together to interpret what the document's asking for and what the functionality of the product needs to be. And, us sometimes collaborating with a lab in New York or Florida to get a third kind of approval or interpretation to make sure that we're hitting every single requirement for that particular customer. So yeah, it is one of my favorite parts of the job is seeing the smart people working together to make these things. And to your earlier point, these things save lives, provide comfort for patients, help our first responders, help America's sons and daughters, and even the motorcycle side help American brands and international brands and recreation. So we've got a widely diversified set of industries that we serve, but it's a lot of fun and it takes a lot of smart people to put these products out into the world. And manufacturing is not easy. Can you describe a time when your understanding of both product development and sales helped resolve a customer issue more effectively?
Yes, I think we had a situation recently where the customer had steadily increasing demand, and we got to a point where the equipment capacity was no longer able to meet the continuing increased demand. And what we found, because that equipment is older and not as easily replaceable, because some of the parts are no longer available, we wanted to move forward with making a slight process change to one of the steps, so that we could introduce some more modern equipment. And that was a really tough sell with our customer. In the medical industry, process changes require revalidation, and it's a lot of quality and engineering's work. So they were really not interested in going that route. but it was the only way that we had identified we were going to be able to meet their increasing demand. And there are some other benefits as well to the process change, improving consistency and producing quality products and maintaining on-time delivery with the demand increase. Because of my product development background, I was able to talk really technically with my customer contact about the benefits of changing the process. And that ultimately convinced him that it was going to be the best route to go, even with the revalidation. So we're really excited that we're moving forward with modernizing our equipment. And the customer is going to be happy because we're going to be able to produce more for them as well.
What do you think is the most critical factor in maintaining strong customer relationships from the initial design phase through the post-launch support?
I think it's always going to be communication. Early communication and often is so much appreciated by your customers. One thing I'll say is that the customers are always excited about their products launching to production, and they understand that there are logistical hurdles sometimes that get in our way from making it to the finish line in the exact way that maybe we hoped and planned in the beginning. But our customers enjoy working with Polo, not because we never encounter hurdles, but because we're very communicative when they come up as soon as we find out about them, so that we have as much time as possible to react quickly and collaborate with the customer so that it's not just our decision, but we're really working with them and partnering with them to make the best possible plan for product development and production as possible.
I was gonna ask, since you mentioned the medical trade show that we went to this year, are there any trends now that you're having to zoom out in sales? Are there any trends
Mhm.
that you've seen within the medical market or any Polo industries that we serve over time that you've noticed if you are zooming out and looking at some of those more macro elements?
I would say we're definitely seeing an uptick in trends for clean room requirements or
Mm,
sterilization requirements.
mm.
It's pretty common in the medical industry in general, but I am noticing it's seeming to become more common that is a customer requirement, which is great for, patient satisfaction. So we're really excited to get into that a little bit more as well.
Yes, our new facility in 2025 will have a clean room in it. So
Very
we've never
exciting
said
stuff.
that on the podcast, so we're publicly announcing something now. That is exciting. Any other lessons learned from your time in both product development and sales that maybe you'd wish you'd known earlier in your career or might be able to advance somebody that's in our industry now?
I think this is not necessarily unique to my experience, but just anybody who works in the manufacturing industry or really any industry coming to the table when we do run into issues with the solution minded focus, I think is so important because while it is important to understand how problems can occur, we really want to focus on next steps moving forward. I think it really helps develop positive rapport with your colleagues and your coworkers and your customers or suppliers to just be really solution oriented. Everyone appreciates the positivity that comes out of a solution oriented conversation.
Having options of what we can do and knowing what actions we can take to remedy whatever comes up is always helpful. I, hear different scenarios often of maybe it's a raw material delay or a raw material like some component that changed like a resin or something along those lines, and it's easy to panic in those moments. But when you flip, what communication, what steps, what requirements there are, and get the right people involved, then almost 9 times out of 10 we avoid the disaster that we can all panic about in today's day and age, probably more so than ever. But I think that's a really great example, Ellen, and a great way to wrap is having that solutions oriented approach. Early bad news is good news is the thing that I feel like I've said over and over since the pandemic. I really appreciate your time today and our expertise. I think this is something that'll resonate with our audience. So thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, it was great talking with you, Sean. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. If you want to hear more about a particular topic, if there's a type of guest that you'd like to see on the podcast, we are open to hearing any feedback and appreciate if you like and subscribe. Tune in every second Tuesday. And thank you for tuning in again for another episode of Inspiring Innovation.